reading from the Psalms this morning is taken from Psalm 65, verses 9 to 13. And Nigel and I will read this.
You visit the earth and water it. You greatly enrich it.
The river of God is full of water. You provide the people with grain, for so you have prepared it.
You water its furrows abundantly, settling its ridges, softening it with showers, and blessing its growth.
You crown the year with your bounty. Your wagon tracks overflow with richness.
The pastures of the wilderness overflow. The hills gird themselves with joy.
The meadows clothe themselves with flocks. The valleys deck themselves with grain. They shout and sing together for joy. And the scripture readings will continue from Job chapter 12, verses 7 to 10. And again, Nigel and I will read this.
But ask the animals, and they will teach you.
The birds of the air, and they will tell you.
Ask the plants of the earth, and they will teach you.
And the fish of the sea will declare to you.
Who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this?
In his hand is the life of every living thing and the breath of every human being.
Why I Wake Early by Mary Oliver. Hello, sun in my face. Hello, you who make the morning and spread it over the fields and into the faces of the tulips and the nodding morning glories and into the windows of even the miserable and the crotchety. Dear star that happens to be where you are in the universe, to keep us from ever darkness, to ease us with warm touching, to hold us in the great hands of the light. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Watch now how I start the day in happiness, in kindness. Thank you for welcoming me here today to share my story. Next slide. Today, I will be sharing a story of healing, which is also very much a story of a spiritual journey. I invite you to take what speaks to you amongst these words and leave the rest. Alternatively, you may wish to focus on the images of nature, as they have a story and a power all of their own. My story will touch upon themes of sorrow, emptiness, accompaniment, discernment, trust, beauty, awe, synchronicity, and service. I apologize in advance for what might be missing, and I pray that there will be a piece of this story that resonates with you. And you'll see on the slide the house plants. I have asked you to bring a plant to accompany you in receiving my story. As you sit with your house plant, I invite you to take 3 deep breaths. Knowing that when we exhale longer than our inhalation, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system, bringing calmness to both mind and body. As you do this, you may wish to imagine the reciprocal relationship you have with your plant, the ways you care for your plant, watering it and ensuring it has enough light, and your plant's offering of oxygen that fills your lungs and sustains your life, and your plant's presence in your living space. In the company and comfort of your plant, I trust that you will be able to receive both the pain and the beauty of my story. I am speaking to you from a forest where I live amongst the trees, moose, lynx, and bear. I wish to begin by expressing my deep gratitude to the first peoples, the Algonquin peoples, who were the original caretakers of this land, which is the current site of the Eco-Wisdom Forest Preserve. I live in recognition of the healing, the beauty, the awe that I am gifted with each day. And I am grateful to be of service to others by sharing this gift. Perhaps it would be useful to provide a frame of reference for understanding my story. My life has two parts: before and after I acquired a severe disability. Today, I will be focusing on this transition point and my journey to healing. As you will see, the second half of my life has been characterized by prayer, contemplation, nature connection, and mindfulness. I am grateful. My life changed overnight. One day, I was traveling the country and the world, conducting research, speaking at conferences, and advising the World Health Organization. The next, I was immobilized, in chronic severe pain, unable to walk, and I had great difficulty talking. I went from studying and learning from people with disabilities who use personal support workers to requiring personal support workers myself for activities of daily living. You see, I had been traveling for work, and after presenting at a conference, a colleague and I went to an ecotourism resort for some much needed rest. We slept in what would be considered a fancy tent, large enough for 2 beds and a few pieces of furniture. Unfortunately, our cabana was infested with ticks, only we did not recognize them as such. The resort had just changed ownership, and there was obvious confusion amongst the new staff about how to undertake certain duties. We saw a couple of staff enter our cabana with an insecticide indicated by the bulb, the tube, and the spray nozzle. Approximately 24 hours later, my colleague and I both became severely ill. As it turns out, we both had been exposed not only to Lyme disease carried by the ticks, but also to the neurotoxic pesticide that was used. This spray has now been banned since it was linked to families on tropical vacations dying in their sleep and others developing permanent neurologic disabilities. Many medical professionals were consulted. However, it took 3 years to diagnose the Lyme disease and over 10 years to uncover the neurotoxic exposure. The change was stark and dramatic. I grieved many losses. My constant physical pain was made worse by the emotional pain felt when others were simply unable to truly see me as the person I had always been. I made them uncomfortable, and they left me alone. This was what John of the Cross would call the dark night of the soul. Tasks as simple as sitting upright were very difficult. Sitting up required back, neck, and arm support. For years, I lived largely a life within four walls of my bedroom and was brought to the point of near death several times. I was alone, and yet my experience of living so close to death enabled me to appreciate the miracle of each breath. Living in this state allowed me to connect to God, securing my faith. At this time, several women of faith encircled me. My physiotherapist, one of my personal support workers, my home nurse. Their ability to be present taught me the incredible, transformative, healing power of simple, faith-filled accompaniment. This was a difficult transition, learning to become still. I found that immersing myself in nature was particularly helpful. I could be transported away from bodily pain to a place of deep appreciation within the incredible world of a single blossom. I called this living deep. Many years later, I would read in scientific publications of forest medicine that mindful nature connection can increase pain tolerance, calm the nervous system, improve mood by increasing the feel-good hormone serotonin, and support immune function by increasing the number and function of the NK, or natural killer cells that fight infection. I made a very slow, partial recovery. I was trying all kinds of therapies and seeking the help of many specialists. I regained my ability to walk and talk. However, I was not able to do things like read, have long conversations, or walk more than 10 minutes without having to rest. I then entered a period of deep listening and discernment. As I considered the question, what did I need to heal? Through this process, I came to understand two things. One, that my healing had to involve mind and body and soul. And two, that I was seeking to become whole, not necessarily healed of all of my bodily imperfection. I discerned, therefore, that I needed to focus my attention on nourishing my spiritual life and attend to my longing to know God more intimately. I was called to go on silent retreat at the Hermitage at Five Oaks Retreat Center. Repeatedly, over a number of years, I spent a lot of time in nature where my days became one long living prayer. These retreats would become uninterrupted periods of prayer, spiritual study, and contemplative practices such as Visio Divina and contemplative photography. Through audiobooks, I learned how St. Francis perceived God's presence in nature and how Richard Rohr describes the natural world as our first Bible. Returning to the land season after season, I felt reassured. I learned where I could expect to be greeted by pink trilliums each spring along the trail. As Rachel Carson wrote, those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts. repeated refrain of nature, the assurance that dawn comes after night and spring after winter. The new growth of spring brought me hope as I recalled Jesus' suffering and resurrection. While on a facilitated spiritual retreat at Five Oaks, I met the director of the Ontario Jubilee program, and this led me to discern to enter their 2-year spiritual direction program. I wasn't well enough to work or even volunteer as a spiritual director at the time, but I trusted that this was to be my path. Meanwhile, along another strand of my life story, my family had been going north every summer and fall to a rustic lodge near Algonquin Park. We became attached to this land and looked forward to returning as a 3-generational family each year. When it was sold to a developer, we were devastated by the news that 90% of the trees would be cut down. My husband, an environmental educator, and I vowed to start what ended up being a year-long process to find a property where we could protect the trees and remain connected to the land in this particular geographic region. When a cottage rental fell through unexpectedly, we were invited to rent a cabin on a large piece of land that was for sale. We were not considering it for purchase as it was way beyond our budget. But God had other plans. God spoke to us through the land itself and its flowing waters. We went for a swim in the cold waters of the river on the property. When we came out of the water and sat on the warm stones, we looked at one another and we knew we belonged to this land. There was no doubt. And we had no idea how we would ever be able to make the purchase. Once again, there was a sense of trusting this was to be our path, a path of protecting trees, living lightly upon the earth, and being of service to others. A very long series of serendipitous events took place as we held to that sense of trust. A great deal of work was undertaken, and an unexplainable unfolding of events occurred. When we had our real estate friend come over to give us an idea of the value of our city house, he suggested that we put a large basement apartment in rather than selling. When we contacted our former and very reliable contractor, he happened to just have a cancellation. And because the sellers agreed to an unusually long 10-month closing period, we were able to install the apartment, have it rented in time to convince the bank that we could afford the mortgage. This gives you an idea of how we purchased this land that owned us. I live as a contemplative artist, writer, photographer among the trees. While my body is not without its ongoing symptoms, I do consider my body and my life to be whole. I enjoy studying the lives and ideas of Christian mystics such as Julian of Norwich, who survived serious health crises and the pandemic while holding on to the notion that that there is a divine goodness that resides in the natural world. I use my lived experience, my training in spiritual accompaniment, and as a nature and forest therapy guide to volunteer in offering nature immersion programs to foster social, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being of others. In concluding our programs, we remind people to take care and take time to attend to and nourish that which gives their lives meaning. We also speak of taking care of self, others, and the earth. By sharing our forest through images, videos, stories, and real life interactions on the land, we offer a glimpse into our off grid lifestyle, living without running water or electricity, and in community with the animals who reside on the Eco-Wisdom Forest Preserve. During one of our white pine tea ceremonies that we use to conclude our 3-hour programs, I had chickadees feeding from the palm of my hand. They were the same birds that followed us during our regular strolls through the snow-covered trails. Our virtual programming helps participants feel that sense that they too belong to this land. Offering this kind of programming has been especially important during the pandemic. We serve those who have been unable to get out into wild spaces, unable to safely access local parks, and those who, due to disability or chronic illness, have been especially isolated. I am here to offer the same faith-filled accompaniment that I once received. My journey has not always been a smooth or pleasant one, but deep listening, discernment, prayer, faith, and trust has led me here to a place where I am honored to be able to accompany others in meaningful ways. Through our nature mindfulness programming, I have witnessed people become intrigued by our lifestyle and close contact with animals, calmed by the sound of a trickling stream, transformed by beauty and awe, comforted by the company of trees. And for some, this guided nature mindfulness programming has led them to experience an embodied sense of divine presence. I hope that you have enjoyed your time with your houseplant and that you find that this relationship evolves over time. I would like to conclude with a blessing. May you be grounded by the steadiness of the earth beneath your feet. May you discover a beauty that nurtures your soul. May you notice a masterpiece in the sky. And may you find that your time with creation makes you whole. Thank you. And now I would like to share screen and offer you a short taste of, what we offer in our programming. So again, I invite you to connect with your breath, maybe with your feet flat on the ground and a sense of your connection to the divine presence above you. And just see if there's a moment during this video that you have that sense of divine presence. Or maybe it's something else that's stirring inside of you, a sense of comfort or other, something else. So here we go. Thank you once again.